So all of this is to answer the question, what is professional gear? Worth noting here is that professional gear does not mean expensive gear. If you're a new player and you're looking to get out of your bedroom and onto the stage to get paid, you're probably wondering what sorts of equipment you might need, because the stuff that works for your bedroom may not cut it on a gig. So today I'm going to show you what I'm bringing to my gigs, and hopefully that'll help you. So a little background on me. I am a part-time musician, a weekend warrior. Basically, I have a full-time job that I work during the week, and then I just gig whenever I have free time. Over the last year, I've averaged about 3 gigs a month or so. I wish it could be higher, but that's just the way the news goes. I wish it was higher. More gigs, please. Most of the guys that I do play with are full-time musicians, so that's the company I'm in when I do these gigs, though. Now, because I am always getting paid for these gigs, you could consider me a professional musician even though I'm not full-time. Anyway, that's where I'm at. Let me show you the gear that I'm using. Let's start with the amp, because that's arguably the most important part of your rig. These days, I'm using the Fender Rumble 500. I've made videos on it. You can watch it up here. It's light, it's loud. I think it sounds great. Now this one I purchased used a few years ago for about $350. It has paid for itself many times over. Suffice to say, I still love the thing a couple years later, and it still works great for what I do. Can't believe I'm still holding on to this thing. See how light it is? I can just have it up here on my lap and it's no problem. Worth noting here is that I don't have a case for this, even though you can buy road cases and slip covers for the thing. I did have a slip cover for a GK combo amp that I was using like 10 years ago. I don't feel like it was all that necessary. That said, if you are going to tour, I would recommend a little bit of protection if it's going to be in like the back of a bus. But for me, where most of my gigs are happening locally, I'm the only one loading it into the back of the car, and for that I don't think it's necessary. So if you're a bedroom player, probably the biggest obstacle you're going to have to overcome is getting an amp that is big and powerful enough. Most home practice solutions are just not going to keep up with a drummer, let alone an entire band. At a minimum, I think you're going to want to look at something that has at least 200 watts through either a single 15-inch speaker or even 2 10-inch speakers like what I have in the Fender Rumble. It's always nice to have plenty of headroom, because if you're maxing out your amp constantly, you can actually damage things over time. The other feature you should look for, most modern amps have these, but just make sure that it's going to be on the amp that you use, is a DI out. DI stands for direct injection. It means that the venue is going to be able to just plug an XLR cable into the back of your amp and get a clean signal with no interference. Very rarely will you ever mic a bass cabinet. The DI is just so convenient. You get a good clean signal, and then you don't have to deal with all the variables that come up when you're dealing with a microphone, like mic placement and what kind of mic and all that stuff. Next up, let's talk about my pedal board. I've just got it in a soft case instead of a flight case because, again, I'm the only one loading this stuff in. It doesn't need a ton of protection, and this makes it a little bit lighter and easier to carry. So let's open up this front pouch and see what I've got going on in here. The first two things are my 1/4-inch cables. I've got 2 20-footers. This makes it so that I have lots of flexibility and I never run out of cable. I think 20 feet is plenty, 15 feet might be enough, but 20 always gives you a little extra slack, and that is very nice. I've also got the power cable for the amp in here. You gotta have that, otherwise the amp doesn't do anything. I've also got this little triple outlet thing. This is really specific to this one venue that we play a lot, but basically we have to use this so that my pedal board, as well as some of the other equipment we use, can all go into the same extension cord. So having an extension cord is really nice, and this is kind of my stand-in because of where I play. An extension cord is probably like the #1 thing that you wish you had at gigs, and so I highly recommend bringing your own extension cord if you have room for it, because they are clutch. The other thing that I forget pretty frequently is a guitar stand. This is a gold tone guitar stand, really, really compact, really sturdy. Love this thing. This is the other thing that I always forget, but because it just fits in my bag here, I never forget it, unless I don't bring my pedal board, which that has happened recently. I also keep a set of IEMs in here, in-ear monitors. These are the Shure SE215s, I believe. They're a pretty basic and affordable IEM, and I use these on my ampless gigs. Now, I have had issues with these staying in my ears just because I have very, very tiny ear canals. I need to get some custom molded ones at some point. If you ever watch any of my gig vlogs and I'm constantly like tapping my ears when I've got these in, that is why. It's because they're not a perfect fit for me, and I've got weird ears. Lastly, I'm also keeping this little bag in here. It's a Starburst bag that was converted into a camera bag, but I'm just keeping all of my GoPro stuff in here. So my camera, a little tripod, and a little clamp thing so I'm flexible with mounting situations. You may not want to record your gigs, but I actually highly recommend it. Even if you're not going to post it anywhere, it's really good to have gig footage so that you can watch it later, see where you messed up, see what you can do better, that sort of a thing. Okay, let's take a look at the actual pedal board. So, tucked in on the top here, I have the power cable for the pedal board itself. This is how all of my pedals get power because batteries suck. Everything is mounted to this Temple Audio Duo 24 board, and I've actually got two mods mounted in here. The first being the power supply. This is a Chalk's High Five mod that powers everything. And then on the other side, I've got a DI mod, and this is how I'm getting the signal out, and then this also gives me a spare DI if the other one on my amp fails. I even had a gig where a drummer spilled his drink on my amp, and I had to switch to this. This was very nice to have. So this board is complicated enough that it probably deserves its own video, so I'm using this as an opportunity to, let you ask questions about it, and then I can answer it in that video. Now, on a couple gigs, I don't actually even bring the whole board because it's kind of unnecessary for some stuff, and in those situations, I'm bringing just the Zoom B1X4 and then a one-spot power supply. Sometimes all you need is a tuner and maybe one or two effects, and that is a perfect setup for that because I can just slip it into the front cover of like my gig bag pocket. Alright, we're finally to the bass guitars. Let's start with the Sarek Lincoln, which is the one you see on the stand behind me. I made a whole video about this bass. It's beautiful. I love it. I just absolutely cannot live without it. And I am taking that bass to gigs in its own Sarek gig bag. I think these are like rebadged mono bags, if I'm correct. But it's got a good deal of protection. It's a solid gig bag. And the backpack straps here make it really, really easy to carry everything in it at once. So like I can carry my amp and my pedal board and my bass into the venue in one trip. That is really cool. This bag does have one pocket on the front. I'm actually not keeping anything in here but a spare set of strings. That's it. Everything else goes into my pedal board bag. So aside from the Sarek Lincoln, I'm also often using the G&L L2500 that you see on the rack behind me, or my Yamaha BB735. Similar setups. The gig bags are mostly empty except for a spare set of strings, and then in the case of the other two basses, I've got some basic tools in there in case I need to make adjustments on things. I need to do that for this one too, but I like to live dangerously, and that is going to come bite me in the ass one day, I'm sure. So all of this is to answer the question, what is professional gear? And mostly, I think it's just having gear that's adequate for the situation that you're in, and then having backups for things in case something goes horribly wrong. Things like spare cables and spare strings. Actually, in the past 10 years, I stopped bringing extra backup basses to gigs because I've just never needed one. Whew, I hope I haven't jinxed myself by saying that. Fingers crossed. Other things that you can bring that will make you look like more of a professional is having a good case for your bass, having a guitar stand. I think those two things count for a lot because they just look nice. But also having backups for things, backup cables, like you don't want to have to ask somebody for a spare cable, like extension cords. Those are the kinds of things that are going to make you look like a pro. Just anticipate things that will go wrong and then bring the piece of gear that will help you out in that situation. For example, the spare DI on my pedal board has come in clutch. Sound engineers love that because they don't have to dig around in their equipment for stuff. You're just prepared to go anytime something goes wrong. It's great. Highly recommend having a backup DI of some kind. Worth noting here is that professional gear does not mean expensive gear. For a very long time, I was gigging very happily on a pair of Squier basses and then just a cheap GK combo amp. As long as your bass is playable and will stay in tune and is intonated properly, it's probably good enough for gigs. As I said in the beginning, the more critical part is having an amp that's powerful enough. You always want as much headroom as you can get, and you don't have to go very far to get that. I think the 350 watts that the Fender Rumble 500 delivers, even without the extension cabinet, is plenty. I rarely have to run this thing at more than like halfway up because it's just so damn loud. So that's all of my stuff. If you have questions about anything here or something that you're considering, do leave a comment down below or even hit me up on Instagram. I'm usually a little quicker to answer on Instagram. And if you're still watching this video at this point, you probably enjoyed the video, so if you would do me a solid, just hit all the buttons on your way out for the algorithm, and I'll see you on the next one. AMP out!